Well, internationally, it's huge because most of the many of the arms are produced in the United States and exported from here. All words need to be translated into actions. Just signing the treaty in and of itself will not necessarily make a difference unless there's actually action put behind it, and that would be the next step. After we lobby for the signing of the treaty, then we have to lobby for appropriate action.
Of course. I mean, once again, that kind of goes on. All of the countries are now connected in every which way, shape, and form.
I think it makes a tremendous difference. Part of it is it's a huge moral statement in terms of the values that the U.S. upholds and affirms. So imagine if the U.S. were finally to ratify the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights. That would be a tremendous statement in terms of the position of the U.S. as one of the few and probably one of the richest advanced industrialized countries to come out and say how important those rights are.
Very important that they should sign these treaties. Why? Because it will send a strong statement to the community that the U.S. government is serious.
We don't, one of the most powerful countries in the world, doesn't comply with the treaties, then other countries have no incentive whatsoever to do the same.
And even at the domestic level, you know, depending on what treaty or convention we're talking about, there'd be huge shifts.
The position is that it would still take a while for those types of changes to actually take place. I think it's important for any country to actually sign on and agree to the treaties.
I'm a believer in law. And I believe that if you're going to abide by something, you ought to sign on it and put your money where your mouth is, as we say in the United States. I think that the laws are important to have on the books, and it's important to have people say, yes, we are going to obey that law.
Being a treaty is also really important because it is a symbol of your commitment to human rights, and it does have an influence on what other countries do.
There's another question of whether we are actually living up to our obligations under either domestic law or international law for the treaties or the conventions that we have signed.
You should definitely still sign them for sure.
I think it's really historical. I think the United States has had an isolationist sort of approach to our activities and our policies, you know, for decades and for many, many years at this point.
I think there's many political reasons.
Trade is very important to U.S. economy, and U.S. corporations have a huge amount of influence on government in the United States.
Definitely now a culture of American exceptionalism. And in some ways that's led to this contradiction of, I think, Americans and the U.S. public to some degree feeling like human rights are something that need to be protected and fostered and promoted in the other parts of the world, but that here in the U.S. We don't need those same kinds of protection.
The main reason is we ask other countries all the time that they should be compliant with human rights policies and be held to standard of the United Nations treaties as well. But at the same time, we are not enforcing that in our own country. So there's a lot of double talk on that situation.
There's a huge gap, I think, within Americans' understanding of the significance of international law and international conventions and how those treaties, bodies, conventions can actually be used to help further a domestic human rights agenda.
It's very unfortunate, and the U.S. should comply.
And so I think education is key to it too.
I think the major problem is that there hasn't been enough education done within the U.S. about human rights, standards, laws.
Take a lot of education around those issues. I don't think it would be just an automatic, okay, now we're doing this.
Nonprofits such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and other international organizations can, really help in educating their members and educating the public on these situations.
We should go into kindergartens and first grades. I think we should educate elementary school teachers and have it part of the curriculum of every school.
I mean, right now with the Occupy Wall Street, I think a lot of people are out on the streets right now, and they understand that, that they should, if they work really hard, they should be able to afford a home. If they work really hard, they should be able to put their kids through school. If they work really hard, they shouldn't have to get thrown out on the street because they can't afford health care. Well, being from the United States, I would love for the U.S. to be the leader in human rights. I don't think we are. I think we have a horrific history of massive human rights violations around the world.
I don't know, honestly, whether or not it should have a greater burden than any other government. The truth is all governments should respect human rights, period.
I think there is a relatively common belief in sort of the ideals of this nation, and I think it's important to try and strive for those. So even though I think we do have this a really tragic and negative history internationally in many ways, I think much of the U.S. population is not at all aware of that and does maintain sort of an idealistic view of what the U.S. stands for. Especially right now, I don't see the human rights as a leader. I would like for us to be one, but I don't think we are right now.
This is one of many forces in human rights. It requires all of us to pull together on this. This is not an American project. It's not even it's not a Western project. It's not a Northern project. It's a human project. And internationally and globally, we all need to get on board together.
I've always believed very strongly in solidarity and working together, and that means mass movements.
I mean, just simple lobbying. I think every single citizen should be involved with lobbying and just simply speaking to their members of Congress, their city council members.
You always need to have people who are willing on the outside to scream at the politicians and at the corporations, but it's also, I think, very important to have good people on the inside who are willing to put up with that process and really help try and change it, and be advocates on the inside of whatever that is, the government or the corporations as well.
Out of office. What speaks more loudly than not being voted for? If we don't like your policies, we're not going to vote for you. It comes back again to the grassroots, people who have to be educated to know what we as human rights activists think are good policies and what we don't. I mean, that's a dialogue. That's a constant give and take. We have to put most of our effort at the grassroots level. Governments respond to constituents.
It's important to talk to people about, so what can you do if your rights are being violated and you do feel you have this right?
Universities would be a great source of getting this information out to their students. Public television as well could play a part in that. And the media could play a bigger role in not focusing on just domestic politics.
We have to use the media to inform the public about the reality of human rights abuses. Use media, both old and new. Use the media to inform the public that the human rights discourse is very broad. It covers almost every aspect of social life.
We as activists pressure from the bottom and create a groundswell of opinion. I think we can change that.